With millions of fans around the world, the Metal Gear franchise has become one of the most popular series in the history of video games.
Metal Gear, for me, was the genre that introduced stealth to me.
But how did Metal Gear begin? How did Hideo Kojima and his colleagues bring Solid Snake into 3D? And what is the future for this beloved franchise? Keep your codec tuned to this frequency, and you'll find out. The Metal Gear saga started in Japan in 1987 when a young game developer named Hideo Kojima decided to build the world's first stealth action adventure. The original Metal Gear was a hit and spawned a sequel called Metal Gear 2: Solid Snake that was released in Japan in 1990. The series was dormant until the mid-90s when Kojima and his team began work on a new Metal Gear game for the original Sony PlayStation. Metal Gear Solid was released in 1998, and the game was a smash hit around the world. Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty was planned as a follow-up for the Sony PlayStation 2 and was released in 2001. Metal Gear Solid 3: Snake Eater, also for the PlayStation 2, was released in 2004. And now, 20 years since he first appeared, Snake is back in a brand new global adventure for Sony's PlayStation 3 called Metal Gear Solid 4: Guns of the Patriots. Metal Gear. The name goes hand in hand with a cutting-edge, state-of-the-art gameplay experience. The mention of the very words conjures up thoughts and images of stealth, cunning, rich characters, and tactical espionage action in the minds of any gamer.
One of the things that strikes me is just the fusion of these memorable characters with really deeply compelling gameplay.
それはやっぱり彼の作るそのメタルギアっていうのがさ、その時代時代で常に最先端をこう走っている、そういうゲームだからじゃないかな。
The series is so renowned for pushing the envelope of 3D console-based gaming that it's sometimes easy to forget its humble beginnings as a 2D stealth action game for the MSX2 home computer system.
最初のメタルギアは、かくれんぼのゲームなんですけど、2次元のゲームだったんですよね。
Inspired by his love for Hollywood action movies, Hideo Kojima gave birth to one of the most memorable franchises in video games. Released by Konami in 1987, Metal Gear follows the story of an American Special Forces soldier codenamed Snake as he infiltrates the military stronghold Outer Heaven. Initially armed only with his wits, Snake seeks to find and destroy Metal Gear TX-55, a nuclear-armed walking tank designed to be the link between infantry and heavy artillery. Despite becoming one of the most recognized video game characters ever, players still know little about who Snake is. But then again, that was all part of Kojima's plan.
主人公なんですけども、主人公イコールプレイヤーなんですよね。だからなるべく、この話をするとちょっと驚かれるんですけども、なるべくスネークにはキャラクター性を持たせないように、そのように作ってるんですけど。
As Snake makes his way deeper and deeper into Outer Heaven, getting ever closer to Metal Gear, he's aided by his commanding officer, Big Boss, via codec. Snake also utilizes an assortment of different weapons and helpful items unique to games at the time, including a silenced pistol, conservable rations, and even a player-guided rocket launcher. Despite the technical limitations of the hardware, Metal Gear features the same outside-the-box innovation, challenging but rewarding gameplay, plot twists, boss battles, and puzzle solving that can be found in the most recent entries in the series. However, perhaps the most memorable aspect of the original game is stealth.
Before Metal Gear came along, I always wanted to run headfirst into combat like Rambo.
例えばそれまではシューティングゲームとか、敵キャラクターを、そのまま攻撃して制圧するようなゲームが多い中、敵キャラを避けなければいけない、見つかったらまずいというそういうゲーム性を、見出してきたことにすごい、ゲームの可能性を広げてきたなっていうふうになんとなく思ったんですね。
At the climax of the original game, Snake destroys Metal Gear only to find that his commanding officer, Big Boss, is himself the secret leader of the sinister Outer Heaven. The now hostile relationship between these two characters will become a staple of the Metal Gear series. as will the subtle social commentary on the role of the military that is left open to interpretation by the player. Metal Gear fared well in Japan, but in North America, the game was a huge success. This drove Konami to produce a sequel for release exclusively in the West, known as Metal Gear 2: Snake's Revenge. However, this game was made without the consent of Hideo Kojima. Initially, Kojima-san did not plan on making a sequel to Metal Gear, but fan support and the creation of Snake's Revenge prompted him to revisit the series. The result was 1990's Metal Gear 2: Solid Snake, released exclusively in Japan. Ignoring the events of Snake's Revenge, Metal Gear 2 follows the continuing adventures of Snake as he's sent to infiltrate Zanzibar land. Along the way, Snake discovers that his old adversary, Big Boss, is the man behind this hostile nation and that he has built another, more advanced Metal Gear. This time around, Kojima delved further into the characters, explored complex political and military themes, and improved the enemy AI, making it more challenging to remain unseen. This was also the first game of the series to use cinematics to deliver crucial plot points, an imperative element for future Metal Gear games. Metal Gear 2 also introduced new characters, including Colonel Roy Campbell, Snake's new commanding officer. Frank Yeager, otherwise known as Gray Fox, who is seen briefly in the first game, is discovered to be a defector and a traitor who Snake must battle in a lethal fistfight. Upon the destruction of the new Metal Gear, Snake is confronted again by Big Boss and defeats him with a makeshift flamethrower by combining an aerosol can and lighter. Despite commercial and critical success in Japan, Metal Gear 2 would never see the light of day in America until the release of Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence 16 years later in 2006. For all intents and purposes, Solid Snake and the Metal Gear series were finished as the 80s came to a close. But that was all about to change. In 1994, Sony released the original PlayStation console, and Hideo Kojima saw the powerful system as the perfect vehicle to reinvigorate his stealth action franchise. The Sony PlayStation was already a hit in Japan, but it became a true global phenomenon when it made its debut at the very first E3 trade show in Los Angeles in 1995. It was clear to Hideo Kojima and his team that the impressive hardware of the new console would be powerful enough to realize Metal Gear in a whole new way. Kojima and his team began researching, scouting locations, and even military training in order to make the game feel as realistic as possible. Motion capture techniques were used, dialogue was recorded, and a musical score was composed. The team spared no expense and endeavored to make the new Metal Gear game the most elaborate video game ever created.
メタルギアソリッドの時に、プレイステーションというすごくこうメジャーなプラットフォームに、関わることができたので、これはチャンスということで、もうがむしゃらに、今までやってきたことと、今までこう開発して研究してきたこととか全てをつぎ込んで作ったのがメタルギアソリッドですね。
After years in development, Metal Gear Solid was released in 1998 to rave reviews and eventually went on to sell over 6 million copies and earn countless Game of the Year awards. The game was primarily story-driven and stayed true to its clandestine predecessors. The advancements of the PlayStation enabled the player to perform more stealthy maneuvers than ever before. This new 3D technology, apart from making the game look more realistic, opened up a whole new world of storytelling for Kojima.
2D はですね、例えばアングルを変えるとかするのに全部書き直しになるんですけど、3D の場合は 3D のモデルを作ってそこに空間を作ってしまえば、カメラはどうとでもなるので非常に作りやすかったです。例えば、狙撃銃を出した時に 50m 離れたところに人を置いてですね、実際に、狙撃銃で覗いたら、そこに物が存在するのでズームすると本当にその、狙撃銃の感じっていうのがすごく簡単に出たので、映画ってカメラを変える醍醐味があるんですけども、ゲームはそれをプレイヤーがこうリアルタイムに変えることができるので、それによってかくれんぼがどんどん生きてくるというか、そういう効果が 3D になって顕著に出ました。
Although released in 1998, Metal Gear Solid is set in the year 2005 and picks up 6 years after the events in Metal Gear 2. It follows the exploits of Solid Snake as he infiltrates a nuclear weapons disposal facility in Alaska called Shadow Moses.
その当時っていうのはなかなかその 3D のポリゴンのゲームっていうのがまだ出だしの頃であまりなかったんですが、レースゲームだったり飛行機のシミュレーションのゲームだったらポリゴンっていうのは割とメジャーで使われてて、でアクションゲームって言われるジャンルでポリゴンのキャラクターが動いてっていうのはなかなかなかったので、僕たちも 3D ポリゴンっていうのに、初めて、挑戦するジャンルだったんですが、すごく難しかったのを覚えてますね。
During Solid Snake's mission, he encounters some of the most important and memorable characters in the Metal Gear story. These included the fiery Meryl Silverberg, the resourceful Otacon, and Gray Fox's incarnation as the Cyborg Ninja.
1の時だと僕はサイボーグ忍者っていうキャラクターがすごい好きで、シナリオというか脚本の中には最初はいないキャラクターだったんですけど、どうしてもこういうキャラが出したいっていうので監督と想像していったキャラクターです。
We're also introduced to Shala Shaska, otherwise known as Revolver Ocelot, and Solid Snake's genetically crafted twin brother, Liquid Snake, whose fates would soon be forever intertwined. Keeping with the tradition of terrific boss fights that were introduced in the 8-bit Metal Gear games, Metal Gear Solid delivers vicious combat scenes that pit Solid Snake against unforgettable villains like Vulcan Raven, Sniper Wolf, and Psycho Mantis.
When you actually fight him, it pretends like it's changing the mode on your TV, like he's changing the video 1 to video 2. And it just made you think about yourself playing the game, like outside of the game.
Wait a minute, and then I realized that's not the brand of television I have. It's like, what's going on here?
By the time that Liquid Snake had been defeated and the credits rolled on Metal Gear Solid, it was clear that Hideo Kojima and his team had crafted a true masterpiece in just the early days of 3D action gaming. And now the world was hungry for more of Solid Snake's adventures, just as speculation grew on a new PlayStation being created. The gaming world wondered what kinds of surprises Kojima's team had planned. In the late 90s, Metal Gear Solid was an enormous success on the PlayStation. The game had proven that Kojima's team was more than up to the task of moving their tactical espionage action series into three-dimensional gameplay. But by the year 2000, a new PlayStation console was almost upon us. The PlayStation 2 launched in Japan on March 4th, 2000, while the North American launch of the console followed in November of the same year. The console had a monstrously successful launch amid complaints of a dearth of compelling games to play. The cries of not enough good games died a year later, however, as Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty was released in North America and Japan in November of 2001, and in Europe a few months later.
僕が一番好きなのはメタルギアソリッド2、プレイステーション2のゲームですね。これなぜかというと、そのタンカーの上で巨大なロボットメタルギアが出てきて、それとスネークが戦うというシーンがあるんですけど、あれがワンダと巨像の何ですかインスパイアの元にもなってたりするので、そういう意味では思い入れのあるゲームです。
The game was definitely the next evolution of 3D tactical espionage action, but Kojima had a shock for anyone expecting to spend a lot more time with Solid Snake. In a controversial second-act twist, the game switched out protagonists and put players in control of newcomer Raiden. The change of heroes was deliberate and focused purely on growing the fan base for the series.
最初はそれで作ったんですけども、メタルギアソリッドでスネークが人気が出てしまって、ある種偶像になってしまったんですよ。キャラクター性がついてしまったので、そのキャラクターを、いろんな人が操作するのが非常に難しくなったということで、2ではライデンを主人公にしてスネークを客観的に見れるような、キャラクターの関係を作った。
But to the team's surprise, the reactions to Raiden as the new main character were not universally positive.
わからなくはないんですがでも出したことによって失敗したとは全く思ってないです。それは今回の方を見てもらえればわかると。
Despite criticisms from players who desperately missed playing as Solid Snake, Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty went on to become the biggest-selling game in the entire franchise. Metal Gear Solid 2 was filled with some of the most spectacular visuals and cinematic scenes that video game players had ever seen. Stunning water effects, complex physics, deep layers of environmental interactivity, and truly mesmerizing cutscenes were some of the calling cards for the game. The complicated story starts with a prologue that takes place 2 years after the events in Metal Gear Solid. The action begins with a dramatic leap off the George Washington Bridge as Solid Snake infiltrates a tanker ship to investigate the creation of a new powerful Metal Gear. During his infiltration, Snake combats invading soldiers who have come to steal the new Metal Gear called Ray. Snake also comes face-to-face with his old nemesis, Revolver Ocelot, who has had his severed arm replaced by the nanite-infested arm of Liquid Snake. In a very tense face-off, Ocelot murders the commanding officers on the ship and sets off explosives to sink it before escaping in Metal Gear Ray. And Solid Snake is apparently lost in the wreckage. Metal Gear Solid 2 picks up 2 years later and introduces Raiden as the playable character. Raiden infiltrates Big Shell, an offshore cleanup facility that has been overrun by terrorists, and attempts to rescue the hostages locked up in the installation. During his mission, Raiden battles extraordinary foes like Fat Man, a bomb-throwing sadist with a predilection for inline skates, Fortune, a woman with the power to make every bullet miss her, and Vamp, a creepy, seemingly immortal killer with a taste for blood. It doesn't take long for Raiden to recognize that things are not like they seem. Big Shell turns out to be a development facility for a new Metal Gear called Arsenal that has been commandeered by Solidus Snake, another genetic clone and brother to Liquid and Solid Snake. In the latter stages of Metal Gear Solid 2, the story veers in an entirely new and thought-provoking direction, suggesting that Raiden is actually a character in a Metal Gear video game.
There's a point like where the game goes to a game over screen. And so you think like, I messed up, I died, but I didn't die. But the gameplay's still going on in that little window. Kojima signifies that it's still a game, but you nevertheless get completely sucked in because of all these other things he's doing to make it feel immersive and believable.
Raiden must face up to the doubts that he has in the world around him before he can stop Solidus, and with Solid Snake's help, uncover the truth about the Patriots, the shadowy conspiratorial organization that has been the dominant force behind the events in the Metal Gear games. Needless to say, the complex narrative was a little overwhelming for some Metal Gear fans.
Metal Gear Solid 1がですね、アクションゲームでありながらストーリーがあるっていう評価を得たんですよね。で最初2の時は、あんまりお話を作るつもりはなかったんですけど、いろんな人に聞くとやっぱりストーリーとアクションゲームが並行してあるのが新しかったんだということなんで、じゃあストーリーを入れようというふうに考えたんですけど、当然続編なので1より複雑なストーリーじゃないとダメだということで複雑にしすぎてしまいまして、これが2の反省です。
For Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, the newly formed Kojima Productions decided to take a more down-to-earth approach.
3は、非常に簡潔なストーリーにしました。スネークとザ・ボスの関係に集約するということで、それで評判が良かったんで良かったなと。
As the PlayStation 2 was handily beating the competition in the console wars during the early years of this decade, demand for a new Metal Gear game grew. And this time, Kojima Productions was prepared to release 2 epic Metal Gear Solid adventures in a single console generation.
本当はプレイステーション3で3を作りたかったんですけど、なかなかプレイステーション3が出ないので、待ってても仕方がないというのでプレイステ2で作ることにしました。それなりにハードに引きずられてゲーム内容も進化できるんですけど、同じプレイステーション2なのでハードに依存はできない。ということで、プレイステーション2では不可能と言われてたジャングルとか自然環境をあえて、やろうということで、ああいうコンセプト、サバイバルっていうコンセプトになりました。
Taking things in an entirely different direction, the developers chose to set Metal Gear Solid 3 in the past, at the roots of the Metal Gear legacy. The prequel would take into account real-world tensions at the height of the Cold War in the early 1960s. Once again, players would be in control of someone other than Solid Snake and would instead play as Naked Snake, a CIA operative that is sent into the jungles of Russia with his mentor, a female super spy codenamed The Boss. In the prologue mission, The Boss defects and teams up with the chief antagonist in the story, Colonel Volgin. After an intense fight, The Boss leaves Naked Snake badly wounded as she and Volgin make off with the stolen nuclear super tank and a predecessor to the Metal Gear called the Shagohod. After healing, Naked Snake is sent back into the jungle to defeat Volgin, confront the Boss, and destroy the tank. To do this, Snake must face the members of the Boss's Cobra unit. Many gamers have called these characters the greatest collection of bosses in the entire franchise. The End is an expert sniper that fights Snake in a long-range, protracted battle that can literally take hours. The Fear is a spider-like adversary with double-jointed limbs and a surgically enhanced tongue. The Fury is a former Russian cosmonaut who battles Snake with a flamethrower. The Pain has the ability to command hornets and uses them to combat Snake. The Sorrow, a spirit medium, is perhaps the most interesting of all the bosses in the game because he employs the power of the dead to fight Snake.
You are walking through, this stream and you're seeing these dead soldiers and you're like, okay, dead soldiers. And then you start to notice like, wait a second, these are the ghosts of the people that I've killed. It makes you look back on what you've already done and sort of see it in a different way. Like, wow, I've really killed like a lot of people. Like if this was real life, I would be, completely haunted.
From beginning to end, Metal Gear Solid 3 is the near-perfect prequel, setting up the events and characters that would follow it beautifully. Metal Gear Solid 3 also helped to define and cement the status of Kojima Productions as world-class game makers. The team had expertly shown how to get the most out of the PlayStation 2 hardware and had the sales and the critical praise to prove it.
I'd never played through all of the Metal Gear games. So I had what I called the Metal Gear Summer, and I played through 1, 2, and 3 back to back. I didn't play anything else, and it was the best summer I had ever had.
But would the team be able to contend with another PlayStation console transition? Kojima Productions' toughest challenges lay ahead as the team faced the limitless potential and the baffling technological puzzles of the brand new PlayStation 3.
Yeah, I think the whole Metal Gear series has been a huge part of the PlayStation success. The Metal Gear games, from the Psycho Mantis battle to the Jeep chase at the end of Metal Gear 1, to the opening of Metal Gear 2 on the bridge, to, the torture sequences that sort of live in all the games. It really is almost like an action movie art film.
小島さんがそうですね、業界に残した功績っていうのは本当たくさんあると思うんですけれども、僕が一番実感するのは作ってる立場からの視点なんですけれども、ゲームにとって物語がどれだけ重要かっていうのと、それからゲームにとって重厚なシナリオっていうものがどれだけ価値のあるものかっていうものをやはり小島さんは本当ゲームの中で知らしめたのかな。
The announcement and development of Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots represented a new era for Kojima Productions, as polished storytellers versed both in cinematic flair and dynamic gameplay. The new platform from Sony offered the experienced game makers the opportunity to dream big.
ボスのキャラクターの特殊な動きをするもの、触手がついているものとか、あと犬みたいな格好で走り回ったりするものとかがあったりしたんで、そういうのは結構全部手付けで作ってたので大変でしたね。メタルギアソリッドっていうゲームが一番最初にできた時のからのなんていうか思想みたいなものをずっと受け継がれてきてる。でそれが今もまだちゃんと残ってる。
With each subsequent release of a Metal Gear Solid 4 trailer, the world grew more and more excited by the promising look of the game. Was this the Sony PlayStation 3's most important game on the horizon? To many, it certainly looked that way.
メタルギアソリッドの1の時は、例えるならば草野球、子供たちが野原で集まってやってるような野球に比べて、今のもうメタルギアソリッドの方は大リーグのベースボールのような大きさになっています。もちろん観客も随分と増えましたので、それなりに責任を感じて、責任を重く肩に背負いながら作っています。
プレイヤーが、こうしたらどうなるんだろうとか、 こうしてみたいなということをほぼ全て網羅しているというか、遊びの幅を広く持つことでその世界の中で何ができるかなっていうふうに思ったユーザーにがっかりさせないというか。
Cutscenes from previous Metal Gear games, as artful as they were, don't hold a candle to the new look and feel of Metal Gear Solid 4, which delivers imagery as close to reality as the team has ever come.
キーワードとなるのがカメラの手ブレ、ハンディカメラで撮ってるような手ブレ感、やっぱこれが一番重要なんですよ。今回ちょっとツールを改良しまして、ある程度その自動的に手ブレがつくようなそういう機構を考えました。
Expectations from gamers and from the team itself were very high. The work involved in bringing this game to the PlayStation 3 was immense. The team size at Kojima Productions had swelled considerably, and the pressure was getting to Hideo Kojima.
プレステ3というか、次世代のマシンなんですけど、非常に作らないといけないものが多すぎてですね、非常に大変です。ハリウッドの映画っぽい作り方に現状になってます。ライン性というかで、今回はプレイステーション3で、作るものも当然増えたんですけど、ボリュームも非常にあって、なおかつ、これが一番大きいんですけど、チーム員が、一番多い時で200人ぐらいいますので、200人対1人ということなので非常に大変です。それが一番辛いですね。
小島監督のビジョンがとにかく大きいスケールなので、それを実現させるためにその人に関してもそのプロジェクト自体も大きくなって、でそれはもうメタルギアソリッドっていうゲームに対してそのたくさんのファンが待ってくれているからできたことでもあると思うんですけれども、
ここがちょっと悲しいことでもありますよね。ストレスがたまるのは一番そこです。
The plan for the game was an epic send-off for Solid Snake and an end to his decades-long saga.
I'd have to say old Snake's mental state is pretty ragged. Now he's deteriorating badly, and he's really paid quite a price for his dedication to his country, to his job.
The epic scale of the game meant that this time Kojima and his team would travel the world, looking for appropriate locations for the most dramatic of confrontations. Sticking with his prescient ability to pick up on global concerns about the military-industrial complex, Kojima focused the narrative on the growing influence of private military corporations. Metal Gear Solid 4 brings back familiar faces that have come and gone over the franchise's long lifetime, and the developers worked hard to come to a fitting conclusion for the series.
サーガの、最終作という完結編なので、今まで出てきたキャラクターをですね、みんな幸せにしたいという思いがありまして、なるべく出しましたね。で、彼らがどこに向かっていくのかっていうのも、方法をやっていただけると分かると思います。
But is this really the end for Solid Snake?
僕の中で、メタルギアソリッドの、ソリッドスネークサーガと言われるものはこれで終わりにしたいです。スネークもおじさんになったし疲れたんで、次メタルギアは当然あると思います。メタルギアっていうシリーズは続いていくと思うんですけども、それはソリッドスネークとは違うもっとフレッシュな新しいキャラクターとか新しい世界観とか新しい物語を紡いでいった方がいいと思います。
In its 20 years, Metal Gear has touched millions of lives. There are fans of this series from all corners of the world. Snake and his co-stars have entered video game and popular culture with tremendous style and will forever be linked to the birth of the stealth action genre.
It was the first. It's definitely a landmark series in video game history.
ですね、やっぱりステルスアクションに尽きるのかなと。
Will we see more Metal Gear games? Or has this series retired along with Solid Snake? Don't give up looking under suspicious cardboard boxes just yet. Although the Metal Gear series of games are fictional, elements from the story are rooted in reality. Whether taking inspiration from headlines around the globe or basing weapons and tactics on modern military applications, the Metal Gear series of games has always been true to its real-world inspirations. The real-world military plays a big part in the design of the Metal Gear games, so much so that Hideo Kojima's development team trained like soldiers.
子供の頃小説を書いてたんですけど、それこそ小学校なんですけど、冒険小説を書いてたんですけど、主人公は当然ハードボイルドなんで車を運転してカーチェイスをするんですけど、自分で運転したことがないので書けないわけです。臨場感がどうしても助手席に座って見てるものでは書けないんで、実際に自分が運転しないとやっぱり本物は書けないんですよね。そういう経験があって、コンバットっていうかそういう、軍事アクションをテーマなので、僕ら日本人なんで銃も撃ったことないんですけども、やっぱりそういう世界を体験して本物を見た上で、どの部分をエンターテインメントに持っていくかっていうのは、やるとやらないとでは全然できてくるものが違うということで、そういう考えのもとで毎回組んでましてます。
To help with this training, Kojima-san recruited military man Moro Satomori to work with the team.
まずどうする？打ち返さなきゃ時間をファイアしなきゃいけない。監督のビジョンがやっぱり鋭いねっていうところがまず1点目と、2点目にすると、それは国の要は軍隊にしろ PMC にしろ結局その戦闘技能ですとか戦術とか戦略でそんな変わらないので、そういう部分では違和感はなかったですよね。
1の頃は全く僕自身その銃とか触ったこともなくってで、銃の扱い方とか構え方とかそういうのは全く分からなかったんですけども、実際に毛利さんの訓練受けてで、実銃も撃ちましたし、なかなか言いにくい部分もあるんですけども、そういった訓練をしていく中で知っておかないと分からない部分っていうのがすごく多くあったのと、実際に本なんかでいろいろ調べてミリタリーのことを勉強してはいたんですが、自分が自分の身でアクションを起こしてやったことっていうのと全く想像できないほど面白い体験だったし、すごいメタルギアを作る上では必要不可欠なものだったなと思います。
This training helps the creators to see through the eyes of their characters, furthering the development of not only their fictional personalities, but the personalities of the developers as well.
主にやっぱり銃器のそのキャラクターが取り扱うモーションだったりとかで、どのぐらいのレンジでどういった戦闘が行われるであればどんな形でそのイメージを組んでいこうかっていう部分とか非常に、知ってると知ってないとで全然違うし、例えば映画を見たとしてアクション映画を好きで見るんですけども、その実際にその映画の中のキャラクターが鉄砲を持って戦っているといや違うんだけどなっていうので、そういう目でどうしても見ちゃうとか、知らなかった方が良かったっていう部分もあるんですけど。
Some of the technologies and devices employed in the Metal Gear universe may not be so far-fetched. For many, if not all, are based on real-world applications.
あとは、もう1が出た後からなんですけども、世界中の、軍関係者とか警察関係者の人とかがやっぱりメタルギアをやってる人が多くてですね、真面目にやってるところを評価してくれてるんで、そこを外せないということで、さらにマニアックな訓練をどんどんしていった結果今のメタルギアになっているということです。当然エンターテインメントなんで嘘をついている部分もありますけども、ある部分は本当に訓練を受けて、現場でやってるような動きとか、重火器の使い方とかを、ゲームの中に入れてます。
Many of these combat technologies are in use today, and still others are in the development stage for use by future military forces.
At the start of the war, we went in with 10 unmanned ground systems. There was only a few of the UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. Now, we've gone from 10 on the ground to more than 5,000 on the ground. You don't go out on an operation without one of these unmanned ground systems with you. And of course, we've introduced the first armed ones. Same thing within the air, UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. We go from just a handful in the air to more than 1,000 in the air. Every single operation has them, and they don't operate without them. You don't go on convoy without having one of these systems above you.
メタルギアレックスに関して言うと、1の時にも出てきたんですけれども、その後ドキュメントって言ってメタルギア2のドキュメントのソフトがあってその中にも収録されてて、それがまず1体とその後にツインスネークス、その後に1体で今回で、3体目を作ることになってるんですけれども、大体歴代のデータを受け継いで、そこから、作り直す。当然技術が上がると骨とかの構造とかも変えないといけないので、そういった感じで作っていきます。シンカーさんの方でもうすでに立体化されているレックスがあるんで、そこら辺を参考にしたり、設定を詰めていく感じで現在の形になってますね。レイに関しても大体同じ感じで進んでます。
The ever-present threat of nuclear warfare plays a prominent role in the Metal Gear series, and Kojima-san has never shied away from creating game stories with powerful socio-political messages.
今回その4のシナリオを書いた時にそのPMC っていうのは、メタルギアソリッド4のオリジナルの設定ですかって聞いてきたスタッフがいて、自分も人のことは言えないですけど、特に日本ではそうなのかもしれないですけれども、PMC とかっていうものが存在して始まっていること自体がまだあんまり知られてないです。
You've always had private actors in war, but then something happens at the end of the Cold War, and the national militaries in the world get a lot smaller. About 6 million soldiers are downsized. The other thing that's happening on the demand side is that you have one superpower left standing, but it's not as interested in a lot of these areas where it may have sent troops in the past. And so companies strive into that vacuum to fill it. I don't think we will see companies take over everything, but I do think we're going to see a return to the medieval period, where if you look back at the 1200s to 1400s, you didn't just have governments going at each other. You had dukes, kings, you had bishops, you had the Vatican with its own forces. Then you had all of these free companies of knights going around where they would work for one duke during this war, and then when that war ended, they'd go work for this king in this other war. We may be seeing a return to that where you have strong governments, sort of the equivalent of kings. You have weak governments, you have mid-tier ones like the old dukedoms, and then the parallel to those old free companies are these new private military companies where they're willing to work for all sorts of other actors.
その世代によって変わるって話だと思うんですよね。だから例えば昔傭兵って呼ばれてみたり、今は PMC って形で呼ばれてるでしょうし、プライベートセキュリティカンパニーって言われるかもしれませんし、いろんな呼び方はその時代によって変わっていくと思うんですよね。
実際に、今の現在の社会で、戦争、あるいは紛争っていうのは世界中でずっと続いてるんですけども、調べてみるとその中で民間の企業がすごく、サポートしているというのが多いんですよね。物資輸送したりとか訓練も含めて重火器作ってたりも含めてですけども、それはある種言い換えるとサポートというか、それで戦争で金儲けをしていると、それで世界中の経済が潤っているっていう現状があります。あるいはその無人兵器を作って投入しているっていうのも実際にあるんで、このまま世界が進んでいくとどうなるかっていうのを、ある程度そういう現状を皆さんにも知ってもらいたいっていうのがあって、4のテーマではそれを選びました。1でいうと、核兵器の脅威みたいなのをやってましたけど、現在はPMC とか無人兵器とか、あるいは少年兵の問題とかがあってですね、そういうことが世界で起こりつつある、起こってますよっていうのを、ゲームをやりながら知ってもらえれば、いいかなと思います。
In order to convey realism in the game world, the team at Kojima Productions have not only consulted with military advisors, they've also traveled extensively around the world to truly understand and represent the locations presented in the Metal Gear universe.
今回は、007のようにですね、全世界を巡るという、まずメタルギアは毎回こうクローズドな閉鎖空間を舞台にするんですけど、今回そうじゃなくて、いろんな世界中を回っていく、そういう規模の話にしました。
To determine locations for the game, it may appear that topography, political climate, and architecture are all part of the criteria, but that's not necessarily the case.
毎回、実は、自分が行きたいところを選んでいるということで、今回、中東はモロッコ取材で、南米はペルーで、東は、プラハですね。メタルギアソリッド2でニューヨークだったのもニューヨークをこうぐるっと回れるんで、それでニューヨークにしたんです。
Kojima-san and his team have logged tens of thousands of air miles, all in the name of realism.
MGS のメインのスタッフたちと一緒にその場を共有したっていうことですね。ただ映像を見てそれに音をつけるんではなくて、それは誰もいない戦場っていうことではなくて、今回の舞台っていうのは数年前にはですね、我々が目の当たりにしたように人々がいて生活が営まれていて、匂いがあって生き生きと生きてる人たちがいて、そういう街の数年後なんですよね。そのことを分かって、どういう素晴らしい人たちがいたのかっていうのを理解して音をつけていくということは大きな意味があったと思ってます。
With all this traveling, each member of the team has their own take and affinity for certain places.
プラハも良かったけど、やっぱりモロッコは、結構衝撃的でしたね。モロッコのフェズっていうところに行ったんですけど、旧市街メディナですか、もう本当迷路みたいな、なんていうのかすごく狭い路地入り組んでて、そこはものすごく感動しましたね。
Oftentimes, it's Kojima himself that's behind the camera, capturing reference material for the environment artists.
ロケーションに関しては世界でいろんな紛争が起こっている中での、非常にイメージしやすい中東とか、南米とか東欧とかを、選択をしました。
そうしてオリジナルのマイクで、レコーディングをしてみたんですけどもね、いろいろと難しいことがあってですね、一番やはり難しかったのは、屋久島の時は誰もいない密林っていうのと、スネークが潜入する密林というシチュエーションすごく似ていた。でも今回は、中東のような戦場っていうものと人が暮らしている街というところにすごくギャップがあったんですね。だからレコーディングが前のようにはうまくいかなかったです。だから大体ですね、ライアンとか今泉さんに心配されながら夜中とか朝方とかにも出ていってですね、できるだけ人気のない、時間に音を取るということをしておりました。
取材で言いますと、僕は南米のペルーというところに行ったんですけれども、前回の MGS3 のジャングルとはちょっと違う、割とハゲ山といいますか、木があんまりたくさんない森を再現したいっていうのがありまして、ペルーというところに行きました。でものすごく標高の高いところだったんで、取材中ずっと高山病で苦しめられてて、半分取材どころじゃなかったなっていうのはとても思い出に残ってます。どちらかというと今回はその中東とか東欧とか南米とか大きいセクションに分かれてるんで、むしろ、それぞれのエリアでトーンを変えていった方がいいのかなっていうところがあって、例えば中東とかですともう光沢をなくしてすごいマットな世界を再現する。逆に、東欧とかに行くと、あそこは雨に濡れてるようなところなんで、街全体がキラキラと光ってるような、より際立たせたりして、むしろ各ステージのトーンをばらけさせていったっていうところはありますね。
It's also during these expeditions that the game designers find new inspiration and can even change previously held notions.
感動したものですか。 開けた空間がドーンってあるんですよね。でそこに唐突にこうインカ文明が栄えたところでしたんで、唐突にこう石畳が現れたっていう、その大自然と人工物のそのミックスといいますか、それがちゃんと共存してて、ですごい美しい景色を成しててっていうのがやっぱ印象に残ってますね。
僕が好きなのは中東の、倒れたビルがあるんですけど、そのあと、アーケードにつながる細い道が一番モロッコっぽくできたかなと。モロッコ行った時にやっぱり匂いとかその空気感がすごい強烈だったんで、それが表現できてるのがあそこが一番近いのかなと僕なりに感じます。僕ライティングでしたんですけど、匂いが伝わるようにってずっと意識しながらライティングして世界観作ったつもりではいます。
Like the military training the team at Kojima Productions partakes in, the reference material enables everyone on the team to truly understand the visual experience the game is trying to replicate. These photos and videos allow the artists to accurately reproduce the textures seen in the real world.
僕がペルー行ったっていうのもあるんですけれども、ナオミをトラッキングする森というのがあります。でそこは結構時間をかけて作って、川が流れて、すごい清らかなすごい自然の空気を感じられるところで、なんか本当は戦闘とかせずにそこにずっとぼーっと座ってたいなっていうような綺麗な森に仕上がっていると思います。
In turn, these realistic graphics help to immerse the gamer into a world they might otherwise never have visited. Whether it's the mortar and brick holding together a crumbling building or the native flora swaying effortlessly in a cool breeze, each begins from a piece of reference material collected on site from around the world. Metal Gear's rich characters are some of the most memorable and finely crafted in the entire medium. And as each successive title in the franchise is launched, Kojima Productions has risen to the challenge of outdoing their previous work.
サーガの、最終作というか完結編なので、今まで出てきたキャラクターをですね、みんな幸せにしたいという思いがありまして、なるべく出しましたね。で、彼らがどこに向かっていくのかっていうのも、方法をやっていただけると分かると思います。
The process of designing a character begins as a brainstorming session between Kojima and Shinkawa. Sasaki then scrutinizes the drawing and with the modelers fleshes it out further before the team proceeds with motion capture and keyframe animation that will embody all of the character's movements. It's at this point that an actor is brought in to give the character a voice, and once all these elements are assembled together, the team has a living and breathing character for the game.
最初に新川さんのイラストを見た時は誰もが嘘だろうと思ってたんですけども、いざ実際にモデリングしてみて、実際のデモにスネークが出力されてみると逆にそれが当たり前のように見えてきて、若い頃のスネークが逆にちょっとおかしいんじゃないのかっていう話が出てきたりとかして、今では最初は違和感があったオールドスネークも完全に馴染んでしまっているという状態です。
Even though they've collaborated for years on Metal Gear, Kojima never ceases to surprise Shinkawa, especially after he learned that Snake would return as an old man.
毎回何を考えているのかわからない人で毎回驚かされます。
キャラクターデザイナーの、方と、イメージのすり合わせを、一番最初に行うんですけども、そこから、ポリゴンモデリングに、入っていって、ハイレゾのモデルを、作成していきます。でただ、やっぱり作成していく過程でイメージが、意図していたものからずれていってしまったりとかすることも、あるので、もうひたすらリテイクを繰り返して、最終的なイメージをすり合わせていくということを繰り返していきます。
メタルギアシリーズだけじゃないんですけど、僕が作ってるゲーム全てそうなんですけども、やっぱり、そのゲームをやってもらって、ただ単に、面白いとか、時間潰しができるとかそういうもんじゃなくて、そのゲームをやったことでその人の人生に何かしらの付加価値というかですね、何か持って帰れるようなそういうものにしたいっていうのがあって、メタルギアソリッドでもそういったメタルギアソリッドを遊んだ結果、自分のちょっと人生観が変わったり、ちょっと知識が増えたり、友達やお父さんとか家族に優しくなれたりっていうか、そういったものをもらえるような、あるいは与えられるようなゲーム作りっていうのでメタルギアソリッドも設計をしてますし、そういった魂でキャラクターが動いているとか、物語もそういったことで作ってます。
When it comes to populating the world of Metal Gear Solid 4, Kojima Productions has employed a group of world-class actors that have the depth and range to bring the game's colorful characters to life. Akio Otsuka returns to voice Snake as an aging character, which presented its own set of challenges.
人の気持ちのひだみたいなものとかがすごくこう分かるようになってきてっていうところはやっぱり年を取っていった方がなんかそういうセンサーが敏感になっていくみたいな、そういう感じは自分の10年前よりも今の10年経った今の方が周りに対するその配慮みたいなものは多少若い時よりもできるようになってきたのかなと。
Like his Japanese counterpart, actor and screenwriter David Hayter returns to voice Solid Snake.
There's been a lot of stuff in this game that just blew me away story-wise and surprised me.
War has changed. The age of deterrence has become the age of control. All in the name of averting catastrophe from weapons of mass destruction.
With this returning cast of actors, Kojima Productions has ensured the continuity between each of the games in the Metal Gear series. Nanotech scientist Naomi Hunter makes a reappearance, and once again she is played by Jennifer Hale.
It's to work with people of this caliber. I mean, this company is amazing. Just they always have their act together. They always have great stories, great scripts, great people. The producer's just spot on. And as an actor, that's a dream. You just show up and do whatever they say.
To help define and shape the beauties in the Beauty and Beast creations, Kojima Productions organized an elaborate photo shoot in Los Angeles, California. Hundreds of photos were taken of each model to help create the digital characters for the game back home in Tokyo.
今回その2段階というか、ビーストからまずビューティーになるっていうそのコンセプトを聞いた時はとにかくそんなゲームがあるんだと。私自身ビーストのままで終わりたくなかったのでビューティーになれて本当に嬉しいんですけど、本当にその発想はびっくりしました。
楽しくもあり難しくもありましたね。自分自身はやっぱり戦争とか体験してないじゃないですか。じゃあそれを体験してない自分がどこまでそういうの内面を、彼女の内面を表現できるのかなっていうことはすごく考えましたね。
BB 部隊は4人いまして、皆さん、鳥です、カラス、ウルフ、あとオクトパスで私がカマキリなんですけど、カマキリの動きってまず想像がつかなくってですね、これもインターネットでカマキリはどういう動きをするんだろうかって調べましたら、大体載っているのがメスはオスを食べると、そういうことしか載ってなくてですね、その動きも鎌でこう首を切っちゃったりとかむしゃむしゃ食べるとこしかなかったので、その動きをどういうふうにゲームの中に取り入れようかっていうのがすごく悩んだんですけども、監督と相談させていただいて、皆さんを操っている最後の BB 部隊ということなので、皆様のそれぞれのやってきた動きを一つ一つ入れてみたらいいんじゃないかということなので、オクトパスとあとレーブとウルフの動きもちょっと入れてみたりとかしてミックスしてやってみました。
まずメタルギアシリーズに女性が4人、しかもその今回のボスは女性だけっていうのを聞いて、私もメタルギアが好きなんで、それはちょっと今までに聞いたことない試みだなっていうのはそれびっくりしたんですけど、
ゲーム的にはオクトパスが非常に面白いと思いますね。ギャグ満載なんで、これは 言ってしまうとあれだな、ゲームを解いてから見てほしいんですけど、ゲーム的にはオクトパスが面白いです。ビーストはどれも非常にこうデザイン的に洗練されてるんですけど、ビーストを倒すとビューティーが出てきます。でビューティーはどの人たちも非常に美女でですね、バグチェックの違いがありますね。
With the Beauty and the Beast, we have the beautiful voices of the female characters, and then on top of that, we have the voice of Fred Tatasciore, who's the voice of the Beast, who has this very sinister voice to him, and it's very deep and very chilling.
Come on, Snake! Laugh with me! Laugh! Laugh! Laugh with me, Snake!
The Beast is a demonic entity that is the worst end of 4 victims of war. And the foes that you see in this game are actually victims themselves. And you have one of rage, one of sorrow, one of madness, and one of just absolute psychosis. And I get to play the character, the demon, at their worst right before they're unraveling.
Phil LaMarr plays Vamp, the former Dead Cell member with the preternatural-like abilities of a vampire.
I remember auditioning for it, and Chris Zimmerman, the director, kept saying creepier. And basically, at the very beginning, I basically just sort of stopped breathing in order to do the voice. Like, it moved so far back
in my throat that it became not alive.
The first game, it was rare when a strike actually hurt them. So most of my stuff was very subtle. This time, there is actual pain. I mean, there's blows that should kill him, but don't. And that's always fun to play. Be like, you know, I've just been gutted with my own sword, and now I'm grinning and moving down my own sword towards you, you know. And a lot of imagination there, like, okay, where does that hurt, you know? And
ですからまあ本当にこうパワフルでもあり粘っこい粘着質な粘着質もあるんですけど、でもものすごいこう強い男たちの戦いでもあるんで、まあ本当にこれ以上の激しい戦いは世の中他にはもうないんじゃないかというような戦いで、本当に今はもう全く他のことを考えられず時間も忘れてガーッと見てしまいました。
あそこはですね、なんかこう監督はすごくフレキシブルで、じゃあこんなことはあんなことはってなんか冗談交えながらすごくこっち気が楽だったんですけど。
As intense as the motion capture in a Metal Gear game is, for Metal Gear Solid 4, the actors were also required to memorize and perform copious amounts of dialogue.
とにかくセリフを入れるために喫茶店に行って、そのセットでコーヒーとタバコとで台本でプツプツプツプツプツプツプツプツプツプツってずっと言ってたんですね。
Kenyu Horiuchi returns as Raiden.
彼の痛みが自分の痛みであったりするようなそういう切なさを僕感じてしまった、戦いだったような気がとてもするんですよね。
There's an energy that happens between two actors when they're working together, and there was a great give and take with Phil and I. And there were times when I was in the moment in my character, and there were other times when I got an opportunity to sit back and watch Phil work. And in doing that, that is like playing with a great tennis player. It makes you want to rise, you know, to the occasion and take the ball and slam it down the throat.
フォード・ライデンは少したくましくなって切なさもあったり、そういった意味では、不死身でありながらサイボーグ的でありながら、もしかしたらとても、人間的なのかなっていう気もしないではないですね。
A new character to the Metal Gear cast is Drebin, memorably voiced by newcomer to the franchise, Kari Payton.
It's just bigger and better and bolder. They continue just to, you know, turn the crank to ratchet it up.
武器戦場を職業としている。で、戦争に加担している側なわけですよね。ただ、彼自身は何かそれをこう職務の一環として行っているだけで、 特にその戦場で人が死んでいくとかそういうことについてあまり無関心なように思える。だから、なるべくこう仕事だからやってるんだよという感じで、ある程度セリフとかなんかにも無責任さっていうんですかね、だから楽しんでる、まあ、野菜売ってるのと同じだよっていうそういう感覚でこうあまり重たく捉えないようにこう軽さっていうんですかね、そういうものをこうちょっとこう加えるようにしました。はい。
And never far from Drebin is another new character in Metal Gear Solid 4, a Gibbon, named Little Gray.
親と子供であったり、その信頼関係を受ける間なんだけれども、どこかこういつか旅立っていってしまうものの象徴というか、それが抽象されているんじゃないかなっていうのはちょっと感じました。
常に大体一緒にいますよね。もしかすると飲み物が欲しいだけでくっついて回ってるんじゃないかと思うぐらいなんですけど、なんだろう、特に愛情があるような感じは見えないけど、ただドレビンっていうキャラクターにそういうこう猿がくっついて回ってるっていうのは、なんかそのドレビンの人柄にこう一つこうなんか面白いこうキャラクター性を持たせるためのなんか小道具のようなっていうのかな、なんかそういうふうに僕はちょっと捉えてはいたんですけど。
猿の真似ってできますかって言われたんですよ。猿の真似って別に、まあ、友達同士でふざけてなんかキキとかそういうのはやったことありますけど、ちょっとやってみてくださいよってそうオーディションが終わった後にやったんですよ。そしたら見つけたとか言われて。
It's one of the great things I think about this series of games is they treat the aging process very realistically. Otacon, he's definitely gotten older. There's been a lot of tragedy in his life, so that starts to wear on a character after a while.
男が随分かっこよくなっちゃいましたよね。最初登場した頃はね、かなりもうオタクっていう感じでしたけども、やっぱりいろんなドラマを乗り越えながら少しずつ大きくなっていった、大人になっていったっていう、まあその部分を出せればなと思って今回の方は演じました。
The character designs just freaked me out, and they really help as an actor to look at what you look like.
ですから僕はかなりバンプの気分とかバンプのそういう全然こうなかなか死ななくて、でもいつかこうものすごいダイナミックな死をこう味わいたいっていう気持ちは僕の映画のテーマにも近いんで、かなり分かるところがあってまあ、共感というか共感して人僕になっちゃったら大変ですけど、テーマとか映画というその中としては非常に共感がある役だったんだというか、むしろすごく理解できる役だったっていう感じですね。
すごく作品の中で重要な役割でとても素敵なキャラクターだったので、最初は戸惑ったんですけども、なんて素敵な役をやらせていただいてっていうところでなんか幸せだなって思います。
In the role of Liquid Ocelot is veteran Banjo Ginga, who previously played Liquid Snake and Major Zero in the series.
感情の機敏のレンジっていうのは非常にこう幅がたくさん取れますので、悪役の方が演じる上では楽しいような気がします。
This man's body has served me well. It enabled me to pass every security barrier between me and GW. After all, the Patriot's security system is nothing more than a machine.
Paul Eiding voices Solid Snake's commanding officer, Colonel Roy Campbell, who comes out of retirement to support Snake in his last mission.
For me, it was a film. I mean, there was so much video involved, and there was so much story involved.
The one thing that kept her alive for me was Snake was always in the background, and that deep connection, that maybe that one true love, you know, that no matter where you go in your life, there's still that one connection that you have with someone that you'll never forget, and that was kind of what kept me alive as Meryl in this game.
普段のトレーニングはやっぱキレよく動くがテーマなんで、よく小島監督からも「いや岡本さん今のはちょっと元気すぎましたね。もうちょっとやっぱじじいとしてやってください」みたいな感じのアドバイスを受けたりとかして、
こうチャンチャンチャンってあるじゃないですか。やっぱどうしてもこう刀2本とも持ってこうやってバサッてこう大きい動きを やってきたもんで、まず歯と歯が合ってるように見えるのかとか。
Every time he puts out a new game, everyone else has to step up because the bar just goes higher and higher.
The final intensely collaborative product is a group of game characters that are each not only unique, but have become iconic creations unto themselves. This has been Kojima Productions' winning formula since characters like Snake and Big Boss first appeared in video games more than 2 decades ago. From the beginning, the Metal Gear games have always delivered state-of-the-art audio as part of the gameplay experience. For the audio team at Kojima Productions, the expectations were set very high for Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots. The game was expected to not only match previous efforts, but far exceed them. No one has been putting more pressure on the team than the team itself. There are many different aspects and layers to the audio featured in a video game. It's not just a matter of adding in music, voiceover, and sound effects. Each of these aspects has to be individually created and recorded first, and then seamlessly blended into a surround sound experience that plays out in real time.
It really is a very visceral experience when you have the sound on it. Mr. Kojima worked very closely with Mr. Tojima in a lot of kind of ideas he had for a next generation game. And so you're going to see this with MGS4 that not only is it going to be a 5.1 Dolby surround sound, but that we're doing a lot of different things that people haven't attempted before.
そのプレイステーション3という新しいパワーのあるハード、それに小島プロダクションというのを掛け算すると大変なことになるんですね。でも新しいプラットフォームで最初のゲームなのに、ちょっと自分ではこれ以上のことが考えられないぐらいにですね、すごく複雑な仕様になってます。でブルーレイのストリームというのが走っていて、それからハードディスクの中に何本ものマルチストリームが走っていて、それに加えて、オンメモリのサウンドがなる。でそれらがインタラクティブに、コントロールされていくというのはとても難しくて、でもすごくエキサイティングなサウンドができているんじゃないかなと思います。
実際にゲームをやって必要な音を自分で考えて、作って鳴らしてもらうと。
Rounding out the soundscape is the musical score, used to create ambience, evoke an emotional response, or resonate a particular moment in the game.
Being a film composer, mostly I'm used to watching the picture and getting my inspiration from there. But without the images at this stage, I had to depend a lot on what Hideo Kojima told me about what he wanted from me. So I think we have a strong theme. He told me that Snake is on his last legs. He's getting a little old now, so I wanted a kind of deliberate, firm theme. Acoustic guitar was his idea.
There's something a little innocent, but also macho.
小島秀夫はその映画の世界にも、それから音響の世界にもすごく関心が高いのでですね、これまでもハリウッドとかいろんな方のお力借りてきたんですけども、その中でもスカイウォーカーランチは小島秀夫にとっても僕にとってもやはり夢の一つという場所であって、それがついに実現したっていう形です。
Performing voiceover for Metal Gear Solid 4 is not merely reciting lines on a page. The stories in the Metal Gear series are deeper and more complicated than many movies or novels. As such, every actor must perform as if their character were a real, nuanced person, in an effort to maintain realism and to ensure an emotional investment from the player.
Use it to shoot the gecko.
I try to keep variety in mind. You don't want all your villains sounding the same. So you try to hone out the individual traits that each of these villains would have. You know, Ocelot is so incredibly flamboyant.
悪役をやらせていただくというのは随分こう儲けものと言いますか贅沢と言いますか、他の人よりずっと楽しいんじゃないかと思いながらやらせていただくんですけれども。
Whereas Vamp is so stealthily villainous. You try to choose the actors, you know, that match the traits of the character and the drawing and the description.
Snake, as you'll recall, following the Shadow Moses incident 9 years ago, Naomi was detained by the authorities, but someone arranged for her escape.
I had to work with Chris and the producers on kind of developing the voice that they were looking for to match this newer, war-torn, post-apocalyptic cyber ninja Raiden.
You may be the hunter, but you are also the hunted.
小島監督と好きなようにまずさせてくれるんですよ。でそれから、軌道修正ちょっとずれたりした時に直してくれる。そのアドバイスはすごく的確だったので、本当にスムーズにできました。
ゲームの監督が全て録音に立ち会ってこういうビジョンなんだっていうようなことってなかなかその現場に来て言ってくれる人も少なくて、でその中で小島監督というのは僕が迷子にならないようにちゃんと来てくださって、それで、ビジョンはこうです、だからこんな風になりますっていうことを明確に僕に伝えてくれるんで非常に仕事がしやすいですね。
When the MGS4 project started, we started thinking about how we're going to approach voiceover work. We had a pretty good outline of how we're going to approach it, and we had a substantial size script, but we didn't really think it was going to take more than a few months. And so here I sit now, just wrapping up the 9th session after 10 months of working on and off with Chris and the team. We haven't sacrificed anything to make a high-quality experience.
Before, it was all about the graphics and the gameplay. It's now slowly becoming about getting in the right actors and making sure it sounds good.
一言で言ってしまうと、リアルになってしまうんですけど、とにかくたくさんの銃声が鳴るんですけれども。
A big part of the sound design process for the Metal Gear games begins here in the Foley studio, with a seemingly endless variety of items that range from the bizarre and obscure to products you'll find in almost any household. The Foley artist uses these instruments to represent what is seen on screen. Sometimes the most obvious choices work, as seen here, with different footwear representing the diverse footsteps for each character, while other products become sound effects for items that are not so apparent.
This is Snake. Do you read me?
What happens if it's the first time the player hears it?
This is Snake. Do you read me?
Excellent. Quality of the script and the length of the scripts are starting to feel a lot more like feature films. You know, years ago, doing a video game was just short, choppy lines that involved the gameplay. But once these stories started evolving and these wonderful scripts like Metal Gear, you can really get some nice pieces of acting out of the actors.
I think Chris tends to ride these guys a little hard. She wants to make sure that she's getting everything out of these guys. Then again, she's known these guys for years and years.
You can have your panic attack here, 172, in.
Damn it! They got the Mark III! It's all over, Snake!
Good. Not only volume, but you're heartbroken here.
The characters, especially the soldiers, have different emotional states. And so we had to go through this process, Chris and I, of recording hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines of dialogue that will come up depending on the emotional state of the soldier. And we're recording the same lines, but with these different emotional undertones. So that whole process, and it's very complex because obviously we have to work very closely with the programmers to make sure that that comes out at proper states. So that process has been very tiring, and but I think ultimately rewarding because you're not going to have a static performance every time you play the game.
Now, I feel very fortunate to be doing Metal Gear Solid 4 because it seems to be a culmination of everything that we've been doing with the previous games.
This
strings can give it a tragic kind of nature, but you may not want that so much.
今回実はまたそこでも初挑戦なことをしていまして、今回メタルギアシリーズでは初めてアフレコという形を取りました。今までだいたい先に音声を取ってから、モーションキャプチャーしたり映像を作っていったんですけども、それだとやっぱ距離感が合わなかったりするんですよね。怒鳴ってほしいのに怒鳴らないとか、すごく近くにいるのに怒鳴ってるとか、そういうのがたくさんあったこともあって、今回は初めてアフレコに挑戦しました。
The Japanese animation has already been set forth and it's already locked in, and we work with motion capture actors that were recorded in Japan, so we have the scenes physically acted out by the motion capture actors, and then we go in and add the US voices to that. So we have to make sure that it matches the raising of a hand, the cock of a head.
Doing it to the Japanese motion control actors, and was very, very funny, and at the same time so effective for performance, because they do little things with their bodies, and every time he moves or he reaches up for something, I can put that into the voice. It's much better for performance. It's very funny to watch the behind the scenes as it's coming together, especially the monkey, who is played by a guy, a regular-sized guy, and he's walking around and doing his monkey thing.
Once the sound effects, the voice acting, and the layers of music are completed and incorporated into the game, they are tuned to perfection, so that the overall experience of Metal Gear Solid 4 is amplified and unforgettable. The capital city of Hyogo Prefecture, Kobe, is a major port located in the southern region of Japan. It's in this city where Hideo Kojima began his illustrious career in video games.
最初神戸ですね。神戸で、開発5部というそれこそ10人ぐらいの部署を任されて、人を集めて作ったのが、ですかね、93年ぐらいですかね、1990。
Kobe seemed like an idyllic place for the young team to create games, but in the early hours of Tuesday, January 17, 1995, as many commuters were about to begin their day, the Great Hanshin earthquake devastated Kobe.
その後、神戸に地震があって、で大阪に移転するんですけども、大阪であれば東京でもいいかなと。
The team decided to move across the country to Ebisu in Tokyo to finish work on Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty. And then later, the newly formed Kojima Productions had an office across town in Roppongi Hills, where the team celebrated the completion of Metal Gear Solid 3: Snake Eater.
で東京の恵比寿に会社を作ったのが96年です。でそこから東京の人を集めて、小島プロダクションの原型ができたということになります。
However, it's here in Tokyo Midtown and Roppongi, where Kojima Productions have now set up shop and are working on Metal Gear Solid 4: Guns of the Patriots.
Roppongi is famous for being the international district. It used to be a place where the American military used to hang out. There's lots of bars, lots of clubs, and it's still that way now, but it's become more of a business district. We've been here for 4 years now, just making games.
The company's various moves over the years pale in comparison to the frequent flyer miles that Kojima-san and his crew rack up in order to salute their many fans across the world. Every year, the video game world holds several key events to bring developers and gamers together, and Kojima Productions sets up shop at almost all of them. The annual Electronic Entertainment Exposition, or E3, began in 1995 in Los Angeles, California. The conference stopped in Atlanta for a couple of years before returning to Southern California for the past decade. But it was here at E3 in Atlanta 1997 that Metal Gear Solid for the original PlayStation first made its global debut. The gaming world hasn't been the same since. Meanwhile, back home in Japan and virtually in Kojima Productions' backyard, the Tokyo Game Show first opened its doors in 1996, and the company has been a regular attendee ever since. The show is especially important to Kojima and his colleagues because it's open to the general public.
まずいろんな海外のショーに行くのは、やっぱりユーザーの人と直接会って、話をしたり、触れることでエネルギーをもらえるっていうのが一番。
In the Southern Hemisphere, the Go 3 exhibition takes place in Perth, Australia. And in 2007, Hideo Kojima was a featured speaker.
日本にいるとやっぱり、アメリカのユーザーの人、あるいはヨーロッパのユーザーの人とかアジアのユーザーの人のことはあまりわからないので、直接行くとどの部分が良かったのかとか、どういうところにメタルの人気があるのかとか、どれぐらいの人気があるのかっていうのはもう肌で分かりますし。それを見ることで先ほどの訓練じゃないですけどもやっぱり作るものは変わってくると思います。
Held annually since 2002, the Leipzig Games Convention in Germany plays host to thousands of gamers and game makers and has become a crucial stop for Kojima Productions during their video game convention globetrotting. At the inaugural Entertainment for All Expo held in October 2007 in Los Angeles, Kojima Productions offered attendees the first playable taste of Metal Gear Solid 4 in North America.
I think it's the biggest game at the show. I really do think so. From the very beginning, on Thursday morning, we had 100 guys lined up to play the game.
Kojima Productions has also hosted launch events for their games at local stores where players can come and meet some of the Metal Gear creators. Over the airwaves, members of Kojima Productions regularly take part in and even host radio and online broadcasts as a way of reaching out to the fans. Hundreds of thousands of listeners tune into new recordings of the Kojima Productions Report every week for the latest in Metal Gear news and information.
The fans, I think they appreciate the work. They love to know what's going on behind the scenes, and which is why we've been making a point over the past few years to kind of be a little more open and let them kind of peek into the studio.
From the very start, staying in touch with what gamers have to say about their work has been a central defining aspect of the team at Kojima Productions. This respect for their audience will continue as the team moves on beyond Metal Gear Solid 4.
I feel lucky. I mean, I'm doing something different every day. And one day I'm in Hollywood, the next day I'm in Australia, and the next day I'm in a country in Eastern Europe, I'm in Africa. This project, MGS4, is taking me around the world, and I'm very grateful for that. When I was 10 years old, my dad moved us out to more of a rural area. And so all of a sudden, I'm kind of by myself, just with me and my little brother. And I found myself spending more time inside and playing a lot more games. And I think that's what really kind of kicked things off.
I would rather them be outside. And with this 2 acres we've got, they could have done lots of fun things out here, but they'd rather be down there and with their buddies playing these games, and they have a whole bunch of friends over. And
Friday nights.
Drinking all my Pepsi and Cokes, and
Saturday nights.
Everything I'd buy, bring home, the kids would come and just take it out of my pantry. There'd be nothing left.
Sunday mornings.
They'd be down there all night and into the next morning playing video games.
It really wasn't until I got the first PlayStation and I saw what games had become with this, like a CD-based format. You have voiceovers, you have more cinematic quality like experience. That was a really big change for me. I moved on from a gamer to more interested in the creative aspect, that everything that goes into these games all of a sudden isn't just about the gameplay, but it's about the music and the voiceovers and the total experience. So it really was when Metal Gear Solid hit that I realized that, wow, this is a totally different direction than I thought that video games would ever go in, and I want to be involved. See, I've done about 15 trips across the pond from Tokyo to LA for this project alone. I think this is my 12th trip to LA this year, and we're only in October. And I expect to have 3 or 4 more before New Year's. Well, I've always been a bit of a workaholic, even in university. I was working while studying at a pretty difficult school, and it wasn't more so to make money, but I always need to be stimulated. I always need to be working on something.
Well, Ryan was always driven. He's always wanted to be an overachiever. He took the toughest class he could.
I knew he'd be like a workaholic. That was obvious because he's always doing something with school and writing and internships.
With Ryan, he tended to balance his life pretty well as far as his studies, his social life, and his video games.
I had a big idea that he'd land in the video game industry. He was always writing about it, and he started a website for video game reviews.
で、ライアンはものすごい働くんですよ。僕が知ってるアメリカ人で一番働くと思いますけど。
So I've always kept myself busy, which is why I think this job has been a pretty perfect fit because it keeps me busy, around the clock. I think people have been pretty receptive to a kind of an American face of the studio. Here he's got somebody who was born and raised in America, who's not doing this for fame or for fortune, but really out of love for games. This is why I've been sacrificing my weekends and not seeing my family for 3 years now. The day had come that I had my bags packed, I was ready to move to Japan, and my parents knew this was going to happen. I think when I entered university and I started studying Japanese, I think they kind of could tell that one of these days he's probably going to move to Japan and use this language that he's been studying. So sure enough, that day came.
It was hard, but it was really hard watching Kathy when we left him in Seattle to get on the plane to go to Japan.
I physically could not get my legs to move. I just stood there. It was incredibly hard.
It was one of the hardest things I've ever seen. Watch my wife, watch her son go off to a very different land than ours.
We all thought he'd come back pretty soon, but he started liking it and started working a lot, and he started landing that Kojima job, and everyone started getting real proud of him. That was really nice to actually see him do something.
Being in Tokyo, being in Roppongi specifically, where the studio is, where I'm living, it's a weird place because it's very international, and we have the coffee shops, the same restaurants that you would find on the west coast of the United States. But being here in Tokyo and working at the studio, it's been a great privilege, but I don't really spend a lot of time at home here in this kind of confined space. A lot of work, but the environment's it's very clean, it's very safe, and I'm pretty fortunate for that. It took a while I think, to get the trust of Mr. Kojima, because everybody who joins the studio, we almost have 200 people working on MGS4, and everybody's got motivation. They have a purpose or a goal that they want to fulfill by joining the studio, by doing those long hours, and obviously Mr. Kojima wants to know that. So it took some time. We had a lot of quality time when we were researching the game in Eastern Europe, and we went on that week-long stay, and all these different trade shows from Tokyo Game Show to E3, where we're sharing every meal together. That's where he really got to, I think, to know me and know that I'm not doing this for fame or to get my name out there, but I'm doing this because I love Metal Gear. And after about 1.5 years, I think he was willing to give me a chance. My specific role on the game is really hard to describe because every day I'm doing something different. And in Japan, on almost every video game development team, you have the token gaijin, or the token foreigner, who's in charge of English. I'm one of the producers on the title. I'm an assistant producer, which means that I can work on all elements of the game. I'm traveling around the world on research trips. I'm helping with master submissions. I'm helping with packaging. I'm helping with gameplay balancing. And for a guy like me who needs constant stimulation, it's perfect.
We were able to visit his office the last time we were in Tokyo, and I know that it was unusual for people to go in and visit while they were working, and I was just amazed of just how many people were there and how hard they were working.
When I walked in the place, here he's got 200 guys on one floor of this building, and they all have their PlayStation and they have their computer and their 2 monitors putting out heat, plus them, all in there, and they got the air conditioning going full blast, and it's still hot in there. How did they get guys to do this? But they must have a passion for it.
When I was over there and I saw him in Japan, it's cool to see him in his element and interacting with people, and it's completely different than when he is over here. And
I find that the people that I've met that Ryan has introduced us to, that he works with, they seem to have a really great working relationship with Ryan.
It's always interesting when you have, something that I've been working on and that a certain team has been working on for so long. To have a new person come in, there's always that, kind of know, what's going to happen over here? How much are you going to try to change? And I think Ryan and I really see eye to eye on the characters, and I think that we really also see eye to eye on the performances, to the point where in the session, he'll be starting to say something, and I'll say it to the actor, and we'll both say, get out of my head.
Working with Ryan was great. I mean, you talk about somebody who's on it and has a just encyclopedic knowledge of what to draw on. Ryan and Chris, they're like a machine. You put them together and you got a working machine. It's amazing.
僕らは日本人のほとんど日本人です。フランス人とかいますけど、90% ぐらい日本人で日本でゲームを作ってるんですけど、やっぱりそれでは世界に向けてのものづくりは非常にこう不完全なんですよ。でライアンがにいろんなものをチェックしてもらって、まあ、ライアンがアメリカ代表ではないんですけども、ライアンの意見を取り入れることで、若干今までとはちょっと違うメタルギアソリッドにはなっていると思いますので、非常にありがたいですね。
We have 200 people working on this game for 3 years who dedicate every day of their lives to it, including a lot of weekends, and they're going home at the last train. And those are like the real stars in the studio. I'm grateful for what I've been giving, but other times I feel almost a certain sense of guilt because you get credit for stuff that you don't do.
My family and getting back home to the States is always in the back of my mind. But I've got a number of ideas for games, and I've pitched several ideas to Mr. Kojima. Nothing that's gone through any kind of pre-production phases, but I'm always thinking, and I'm always waiting for that opportunity.
I miss my family. If there was ever a reason to go back home, it would be to spend more time with my family. I have a great job. I live in a great city, but it lacks one thing, and that is my family.
We've been very fortunate that Ryan's been home. In fact, he might be home more than a lot of young men that go off and start their careers. And so we feel very fortunate that Ryan comes home as often as he does.
I do miss him, you know. He's my older brother, and it's good to have him around sometimes.
I thought that this video game industry was going to be a phase, and it would kind of go away. And then now I'm kind of thinking maybe this was a good move. And he's obviously good at it, so why not go for what you're good at?
It's a comfortable place to be. I mean, there's a lot of pressure still. I mean, there's a pressure to succeed and to be #1, and it's always on your shoulders, and it's hard to forget. But on the other hand, I'm surrounded by people that love games and they're so cool and so talented that I really embraced this opportunity that I had. And despite the fact that there's hard times and certain sacrifices I had made, but all in all, it's just been an incredible experience and one that I would never give up.
Roll camera. More smoke. Okay, here we go. We're rolling. Action.
For me, it's been kind of 3 years in the making. First, we talked about doing a logo, and then all of a sudden, we're talking about the opening movie.
I'm gonna get it right.
Alex, the mastermind behind the studio. The Logan guys, they have the experience, they have that creative eye, and they've made a big name for themselves, making really cutting-edge commercials and visual effects.
I've worked in a lot of places before to realize I wanted to do it a different way. I still believe that you can do large commissions and big projects without turning into a corporate shop. You can stay relaxed about it, and we want people to have a great time being here, working with us, trying to make things great.
What we're doing here is pretty revolutionary, I think, in video games. People just kind of give us this look because nobody's ever attempted this before. It's basically a parody on American television, but with a little bit of a darker edge because it's still set in the Metal Gear Solid 4 world. And this is basically like a cool way of giving the player an idea of what the world of MGS4 is like.
The task was to come up with an interpretation. But so each individual show is meant to be a completely different piece of content that some futuristic, non-existent TV network would create. On top of that, there's 5 different commercials for each PMC. It's just kind of a massive undertaking. You have to pretend to be 20 different people that came up with these ideas. It's kind of like a schizophrenic exercise.
The first one I wrote was the cooking show.
Target, action. Nicely kneel, easy on the heart.
We have the chef who's out of the ordinary. He's not a friendly guy from the kitchen, but we have him cooking for the family. He has a co-host named Rachel. She's taken aback by some of his gestures and the way he speaks.
Got there.
This could be the first channel that comes up. So when they look at this, we want that WTF moment, but we also want them to be intrigued and want to keep watching.
We have been planning this movie sequence for a long time, like 1.5 years. We're gonna shoot the whole thing in 6 days, only 6 days. But Team Logan is very, very talented, so we trust them.
We were thinking of shooting on film, and because of the schedule, and we decided to go with HD video. Red seemed the way to go. Now we've got this 4K resolution files. We're bypassing telecine. We're able to control every part of the process. There's a massive amount of cleanup work that needs to happen on green screen footage, even live action footage of a praying mantis plates, where we need to track it. We need to computer-generated elements that perfectly match the perspective and the angle and the speed.
The scum who wishes they didn't try. Wakey, wakey, praying mantis.
It's really beautiful the way that this opening project has come to be. It's been over a decade in the making. It's Ken, our producer, and Alex, the lead over at Logan, being art school friends, always promising each other that they're going to work together at some point in the future. And here we are, many, many years later, and we need an opening movie for Metal Gear Solid 4, and then we want something cutting edge in pop culture. That's what Logan made for. Watching Alex deliver the final build and having Ken there and watching them load the final files into the game is really cool to see. It's kind of nice to see that this friendship has lasted for so long and they finally accomplished something that they promised such a long time ago.